In March of 1978, I found myself lying on a bed. This was strange, because 2 seconds before I seemed to have been lying in a pool of blood with massive injuries to my physical body. I arose from the bed and stared at my left hand. It was now reattached to my wrist. A few seconds ago, the hand had been missing among the rubble of my wrecked car. As I struggled to remember what had just happened, it seemed as if everything was disappearing. I had an understanding of events that had just transpired, but the details were leaving my conscious mind. I struggled to hold on to the memory as it evaporated from my sight. I was left with only a memory of lying in a pool of blood with my left hand separated from my wrist and the lower section of my body lying in what used to be the back section of the car I had been traveling in. I was in shock. How could I travel through time and space in a matter of a few seconds? It had been 10 p.m. when I crashed the car. It was now 10 a.m. as I sat up in the bed looking at my left wrist and my 2 legs. I wanted to know by who and how the damage had been repaired. It was not a dream, but yet I was lying in a bed as if I had been asleep. My mind was as connected to the 10 a.m. and the 10 p.m. as if nothing had happened between the 12 hours. I knew differently. I got up and ran toward the living room of the house. I asked my mom what had just happened to me. She was as confused by my statements as I was confused by the missing time. She insisted that I had a dream. I told her that I knew the difference between looking at my hand in a dream and looking at my hand while I was awake. I said, as I look at my hand now, I have a memory of a few seconds ago when it was nothing more than a bloody stump. It was too real, and the image in my mind is too real and vivid to be a dream. It was real. My whole body was split in half. My legs were gone. I was desperately trying to hold my insides in with my stump of an arm while I reached for my legs with my good right hand. The right hand was still on. It was real. How did anyone ever fix something like that? How did you all find me? I was 5 miles outside of town in the middle of nowhere. How did an ambulance find me? I was sitting in the middle of a cotton field. I don't see how they found me and fixed me up like nothing happened. My mom kept insisting that nothing did happen. I then remembered seeing my car. I'd only had the car for a few months. It was my pride and joy. I ran to the front door and found it sitting in the driveway shining like it had just rolled off the showroom floor. It was 3 years old. My mom remarked how clean it looked. It didn't shine. It sparkled as if stardust had been mixed in with the wax. I ran to the car and looked all over for signs that it had been sitting in a cotton field after crashing at 125 mph. There was not a scratch, spot, or speck of dirt to be found anywhere. I opened the hood and even the engine sparkled. There wasn't a spot of oil or grime anywhere. I told my mom, "This is not my car. I know my car, and this is not the one I was driving yesterday." I spent an hour talking to my mom. I finally came to the conclusion that I had been in a major accident. I thought the month was October. She told me it was March. I concluded that I had been in a major accident in October and had laid in a coma somewhere while they fixed my body and my car. They didn't want to face the bad feelings of the injuries and decided to make as if nothing had happened, to go forward and get on and not look back at the bad of the past. That was the only thing my mind could make sense of. I tried to talk to friends and family about my so-called coma. Everyone denied that I had been in an accident or a coma. They knew what they knew, and I knew what I knew. They were hiding something. I always got the impression of some sort of quilt. It turns out that a friend of mine had committed suicide on the very road I said I had crashed on. I had no memory of any friend. They mentioned his name and it drew a blank. I asked and they ducked the issue. They wanted to forget something and they wanted me to leave the questions alone. Everyone was glad that I couldn't remember the last 5 months. This only added fuel to the fire of my suspicion that they were not being truthful with me. I took a family member and several friends out to the road. There was an imprint in the ditch of a car grill. There was massive destruction of the cotton field but no metal of the wreckage. Someone told me that I was going through a lot of trouble to pull a hoax. Some more memories poured into my mind over the weeks. I had crashed the car and when it came to a stop, I had been cut up badly by the windshield and flying glass. I screamed out for God to help me. Then I stood outside of my car. I felt naked because I didn't have clothes on anymore. My first thought was that I had been thrown from the car and had imagined the bloody scene in the car. I then thought, how was I going to get home and explain how come I was naked? I looked at my car and it was totaled. There was steam coming from the front of the car. I could not tell it was the hood because of the condition of the steel. It was so mangled and torn it didn't even look like a car. It looked like a small ball. I saw a tire come flying from the sky and hit the ground and roll away. Then the thought hit me that my dead body was inside the car. Something told me to go and look and I declined. I had already seen what it looked like and I didn't want to see it again. That is when I realized I had died. I was no longer in the physical body. Just then, I heard a noise. It sounded like wild animals growling and laughing. They sounded like laughing hyenas. I could see them in the distance running toward me. I cried out to God for help. I started floating toward the sky or upwards. It was then that I remembered I had a goal. I was looking for a friend who was stuck on the other side of death's door. He had not been able to make it to God. I was there to get him and take him to God and beg for forgiveness on his behalf. I told this force that was lifting me upwards to let go and let me get at those nasty creatures. I was going to kick every one of them in the butt to get to my friend. I had to get my friend before I could go to God and knock on heaven's door. Something told me to let go and stop struggling. I said, I am not going anywhere without my friend. A voice said, your friend is with you as you speak, turn and see for yourself. I turned and I was carrying my friend on my back. I shouted out a victory cry and zoomed upwards. I traveled at a 45-degree angle until I reached a light. It was like a laser show that I could hear, feel, see, touch, smell, and taste. It was marvelous. When I reached a level, I zoomed forward and merged into a light. That is all I could remember in 1978. I told everyone I could that I had taken a rocket ride to heaven. People asked who my friend was, and I told them I didn't know. I only referred to him as my friend. When I turned to look behind me, all I could see was his back. His back was to my back. I couldn't see his face and only heard his voice. I had no idea who it was. For months I talked about this experience. People said that whatever it was, it had changed my personality. They said I was a different person in the same body. They still never told me about this friend of mine who died. I had no idea why he took his life. He was a total mystery to me. No one ever believed me when I told them I had been in a major car wreck, died, and then somehow came back to life, until 1988, I was in a slight mishap that sent me to the hospital in an ambulance. I awoke again with 12 hours missing from my life. I had no idea how, or why I was in the hospital. The doctor came in and told me that I had fallen on an old injury. He wanted to talk about that old injury. He told me that he had found evidence of the most remarkable surgery he had ever seen. He told me that it looked like I had been mutilated inside and then put back together somehow. He said that the surgical scars defied anything he had ever witnessed before. I asked him if it looked like damage that might have been done after rolling around in a car at 125 mph. He told me that is exactly what he seemed to be looking at. I told him that I had always known that it happened, but people tried to convince me that it didn't. The doctor wanted me to find the doctor who had done the surgery to repair the damage he saw evidence of. I told him it would do no good. I had already called every hospital in my old hometown looking for information and no one had any. It was like it never happened. I told the doctor that he was the first person in my life who ever believed me. He told me to allow him to show my files to the world and everyone in the world would believe me. I told him that I would pray about it and see what my dreams told me to do. I came back and told him that I couldn't show them until 1999. I had to wait for a promise to come true first. The doctor was disappointed, but I told him I had to follow after my own heart and remain true to my visions and dreams. A few months ago, I remember both those 12-hour periods in 1978 and 1988. I had a NDE experience during the 1988 incident also. The paramedic who revived me later told me that I had been without vital signs for 26 minutes. He told me that the only reason he put the oxygen mask on me was because I had talked to him while I was outside the body. I could remember this in 1988 the next day when he asked me about it. I can remember it now. I was outside trying to get back in. I also believe in reincarnation now. The promise I was given during both those NDEs was that my friend would be returned to life again. He was reborn in a new body. I have been waiting 21 years for him to grow up. I am supposed to extend my